Hello and welcome to another episode of Fast Talkers as we catch up with our paddock pals really and have a good chinwag about all things Formula One. I'm delighted to say I have a fabulous panel as ever. Let's start with Jess Mcfadyen. She is the Motorsport Network Director of Digital Strategy. Delighted to have you on, Jess, and in the middle of two great races. We always said, didn't we, these were going to be the good ones.
These were the ones where we weren't really sure what was going to happen, because obviously with Portimao, we'd never had Formula One cars racing anger around there. And I thought it was a great race. It was kind of mixed opinions on Twitter. I saw some people found it boring and dull, I guess maybe because of the win margin that Lewis Hamilton had in the end of the race. But just thought it was visually brilliant. The start was brilliant. There was some great strategy plays. And then going into this weekend, we've got Imola, which we've obviously not been to in years. And another one of these kind of classic characterful tracks. So I'm really, really looking forward to. These have been, I'm hoping after the end of Sunday, we're going to have come off the back of two really great races.
Well, if not, we'll blame you anyway. That's fine.
Exactly. That's fine.
Next up, let's go to the US, and our American-based journalist of motorsporting amazement is Seth Harding. Seth, hi. Good morning to you. I think it's still morning where you are. How have you been finding this calendar and trying to follow all the races from the US?
You know, it's well, first off, it's sad that we didn't get a chance to get any Formula One racing in the US this year. So we've just been, tracking as best we can here. We've got wildfires, we've got great racing, and that's what we've had in the last couple of races, just like Jess said, with Portimao and now getting ready to go to Imola. I think it's going to be exciting back-to-back race, and we're getting close to the end of the season. So we're going to have some more great racing ahead of it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We lost you a little bit in there, but I'm sure whatever you said about wildfires was very significant. I mean, I'm assuming you haven't been out in the wildfires.
No.
Good. That's the main thing. Okay, stay safe, Seth. Right, we'll be back with you in a second. Let's go across to our Dutch motorsport journalist and now published author. Yes, you heard that right.
Yeah, there it is.
It's Allard. Allard, hold it up again.
Hello.
I'm really impressed by this.
It's good, isn't it? It's nice. It's B and Jos at the, I think it's Melbourne, 1996. So that's the cover. And it's lovely. It's 270 pages of my life.
Wow.
And
can you hold it up again? Because I want to try and pronounce the title. Right, I'm going to go with Leven in de Racerij.
Almost. Leven in de racerij.
Yeah.
Living in motorsport, basically.
Amazing.
So, and it's, I'm happy with it. It's my life, but it's not really my life. Well, it is, but it's more about people like Ayrton Senna, George Harrison, Alex Zanardi, Rubens, Johnny, Michael Schumacher, Johnny Herbert, of course. And what I've done with them and what I've experienced and what we did and what we did when we're not on the racetracks and all that. So I'm actually really, really happy with it. So
and just tell me, how can people get their hands on it? Can they get it online? And do you have to be able to read Dutch?
Yeah, you have to be able to read Dutch, and it's available at bol.com as a book, ebook. You can listen to me. I've done the whole, I don't know what you call them in England.
Audiobooks.
Audiobooks. It's an audiobook. I've done it all myself. And it's in shops tomorrow and online. So it's good. Happy with that.
Amazing. I'm so impressed. And I can't obviously read or even listen to the stories, but knowing you, they will be fascinating. So Good stuff. Right, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton then. And Seth, I'm going to start with you if that's okay, because 92 race wins, and it was clearly the last two races have been very emotional for Lewis Hamilton. Him collecting Michael Schumacher's helmet from his son Mick Schumacher and then going on to beat the record of 91 race wins. How significant do you think it is for both Lewis, but also for the community that is the wider average white man community?
What Lewis Hamilton has done and what he's achieved is amazing. And I think as much as people, have been shooting around, car, we forget about the human being that drives the car. We forget about the human aspect of what it takes to drive in a Formula One car, what it demands of the body and the mind. And it takes a certain caliber person to do that. And Mercedes have put together, yes, an incredible piece of machinery. They've had forged Lewis Hamilton essentially a mighty sword, but you have to have a skilled swordsman to wield that sword. And that is what Lewis Hamilton has done. And what he's done in terms of for people of color, yeah, he's inspired a tremendous amount of people of color in what he's done. To every young boy and girl who want to achieve and find their way in motorsport, he has inspired those. Even across here in the U.S., I mean, Lewis Hamilton has a huge following in the U.S., and that's because they've gotten to know Lewis Hamilton, the person, through his social media, through the things that he believes in, that he has fought for and he's spoke out about. And, I know a lot of people have disagreed with what Lewis Hamilton has talked about, but this is nothing new. We've had a history of athletes, come forward and use their platform to speak out against social injustice, civil rights. This has gone on for decades. We can go down the line to Arthur Ashe. We can go down the line to Jackie Robinson. We can go into, Serena Williams. We can go down the line of many different athletes throughout history who have spoken out against racial injustices and social and civil rights. And Lewis Hamilton just steps in that, and he's taken that. And something else I want to add, when you're racing against Lewis Hamilton, you're not just racing against Lewis Hamilton, the driver. You're racing against Lewis Hamilton, this young man at 8 years old who had to deal with racism, who had to deal with discrimination, who had to sit there and just wrap your mind around that for a minute. Being an 8-year-old child wanting to go just kart race, and you having to walk on a kart track and having to deal with that, being called certain names, certain derogatory names, and being felt like you're not wanted there. Lewis Hamilton's had to take all that. He's had to grow up with that. And when he goes on the racetrack and when he puts that helmet on, he is taking that with him. And he's not just driving for himself. He's driving for every person who has dealt with that, who has dealt with discrimination and racism. And that is what other people are racing against. And that's why he's able to dig into that extra gear. He's able to find that extra, strength inside him to push through different conditions and, different situations and just keep his head down.
I mean, Allard, from your point of view, you've been in the paddock around many a great. I mean, some of the names you mentioned in your book are some of the people that, you've grown up with. So what do you think of Hamilton, 92 wins, beating that of Schumacher, just putting his name into the history books, I suppose?
The diehard Michael Schumacher fan will say Michael would have won more if he could have stayed at Ferrari, if he could have stayed at Mercedes a couple of years more, but he didn't, So that's 92 or 91 was the number, and Lewis has beaten that, and that's it. He's won more races than anybody else on this planet. He's awesome in the racing car. I don't really care what he does outside of a racing car. When he puts that helmet on, he's just mega, and he deserves it. And he probably goes up to 100 and maybe more. The only thing he's lucky, if you compare it to people like Fangio and that era, there's quite a few more races, and people don't get hurt anymore. And people don't, well, I'm not going to say they don't die anymore because we're going to Imola, but the chances of getting hurt and missing races is a lot less than it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So that's the only thing that works in his favor. But, hats off. I mean, 92 races. I mean, you were there, I think. I mean, we were both there when he won his first race in Canada, 2007, 13 years ago. To be 13 years on top of your game, beating everybody. And yes, he has a really good car, but so does Valtteri. He's got exactly the same car. So did Nico all those years. So, hey, put that helmet on, and he's very, very, very good.
I mean, Jess, most of the people who have won serial championships have had a dominant car. That's kind of the name of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all very quickly quick to forget certain eras of dominance, and how maybe if we were back in those times, there were still those people shouting about, well, it's because Ferrari's so good, of course Michael Schumacher is winning. But there's a phrase that I heard that I keep repeating, because I think it's one of the best things I've ever heard. Good drivers get the best cars, but great drivers keep them. And I think that's such a poignant phrase, because, you know, you look around and you look at the potential record holders that we might have had in the same era as Lewis Hamilton, your Sebastian Vettels, your Fernando Alonso's. And the difference there is they for one reason or another didn't keep the best cars. And some of it was outside of their own doing, but others were choices that they made. And I think we sometimes also forget what a big decision it was that Lewis Hamilton made when he decided to switch to Mercedes. A load of people said that he was absolutely out of his mind. I actually was one of the people that were like, watch this space, I think there might be something here, you know, just
Love
saying,
it.
you know, I had all the info back then. I didn't, but I just had this feeling that, you know, Ross Brawn could do it again, and it turned out that he did. But from that point, there has never ever been any moment where anybody has felt that Lewis Hamilton wasn't going to be in that top team. And that's, I think, to do with the fact that he's such a well-rounded driver. You know, he's not just unbelievably quick. He's smart. He's marketable. He works well with the engineers and helps to develop the car. And he just puts in performance after performance after performance. And that's what I think it takes to be a great. I think Schumacher had the same thing. He was just a great. And I know we're going to get on to potentially greatest of all time discussions, so I won't jump the gun just yet, but I think it's qualities like that differentiate good drivers from great drivers. So the fact that the machinery retaliation is thrown in Lewis's face, I think, is unfair, for reasons that we've all said, because I think it's man and machine in the perfect pairing gives you record-breaking results.
Let's not forget, Mercedes was not a top team at that time. You know, they were barely in the middle of the Constructors' Championship. They had gotten close a few years, but they were nowhere, you know, near where Ferrari and McLaren were. And like Jess said, they thought he was crazy. You know, everyone thought he had lost his mind when he went there. You know, but just like Jess said, you know, he gets on the team, and you have to have a driver that's going to galvanize and synergize that team and get everyone gelling together and help develop that car. And that is what Lewis Hamilton has done.
The thing is, that's what world champions do anyway. If you look back, if you look like Mika Häkkinen going to McLaren, Michael going to Ferrari, maybe even Fernando going to Renault at the time, and now Lewis going to Mercedes. But it's what Jess says, it's like staying there, keeping hold of that car, keeping that motivation for all those championships. I mean, he's won, 5 with Mercedes now. I mean, that's just, you know, that's just basically unique, you know, I mean, and that is what is the trick. I mean, and again, I keep saying, Valtteri and Nico's had the same car, they had the same opportunities. And I mean, Nico had to dig so deep to beat Lewis that year. And maybe he had a little bit of luck and Lewis didn't that year, but he had to dig deep, and he knew he had to dig deep again to beat him. And I don't think he was prepared to do it. And, you know, won a world championship, retired, well done. Really good, brave decision.
Allard, what I want to ask you, obviously you were in the paddock around the time of Schumacher. So how do you compare Schumacher with Hamilton? Because that's the question everybody wants to know. And you kind of know them both.
Basically, they're exactly the same. They are so dedicated with the attention to detail, the perseverance, the working with the team. And to me, what makes a great driver is deliver when it's needed. Deliver in qualifying, deliver in the race. Whenever you need to do the fast laps, you do the fast laps. Whenever the lap time counts, you do the lap time. And basically, Michael and Lewis are not that dissimilar. I mean, I think that the biggest difference between the two is that Michael had a family and Lewis doesn't. I mean, Michael had kids and a wife, and Lewis got Roscoe, you know? So that is probably the biggest difference there is between the two, because the way they work, I don't think there's a huge difference.
What about to sit down and interview?
Well, Michael was more cheeky. And Michael for me was easier because I've known Michael since his Formula 4 days. And so I've known Michael since 1987. So that was always easier to talk to and to be cheeky to. And Lewis, in a way, Lewis talking reminds me more like Ayrton in a way. He thinks, he wants to talk about other things than just a racing car. And Michael was, when the camera was on, it was racing.
Seth, how have you found Lewis when you've had the opportunity to do an interview with him?
He's a very down-to-earth person. You know, he's very, but you have to come at him with respect, just like any person. I mean, and I think oftentimes people misread Lewis and misread the kind of person he is. He's a guy that will give you the shirt off his back. You know, he's an incredibly warm human being, very passionate, you know, and he's passionate about the things that he believes in, you know, and you talk to him, just like I think any other driver on the grid, though, you talk to him like a person. You know, you don't sort of have this godlike, you know, mentality about it, you know, like, oh, we can't talk to them and get friendly with them. No, you talk to them because that's what they appreciate. They like it when you just say, hey, how's your day going? You know, and we can talk about world events, and Lewis will be happy to talk about what's happening around the world, you know, and I think that's something that may separate a little bit from him and, you know, Schumacher. It's what they do off the track that's just as important for a lot of fans as well.
Jess, what's been your experience?
He's very considered. I feel like whenever you ask him a question, he really wants to give you the right answer, or, you know, and not that he's spinning things or anything, but he just really wants to give you a considered answer. Sometimes when I've spoken to him, he's given me the longest answer out of any driver, even asking the same question. He can get really into things and really engaged. And he also, like the guys have both pointed out, he notices things. Like I remember interviewing him, and somebody on my team had a specific accent, and he stopped and he went, "Where's your accent from?" And got into a conversation with this person about where in London they were from, and then started talking about that. So I think sometimes from the outside he can, and maybe sometimes the way the media portrays him, the fact that he has a scooter and he flies up and down the paddock because he doesn't want to have media taking photographs of him or stopping him, or he can have this maybe standoffish diva-like persona that's been driven, but that's not the experience that I've ever had of Lewis. But you also have to remember that he is currently and soon to be undisputedly the most successful Formula One driver of all time. And with that comes such huge weight. Everybody wants a piece of you. Everybody wants to know everything about you. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know what you do when you wake up in the morning. I think he's actually been really open in talking about how lonely that life can be and how difficult and isolating that life can be. And I think he's very brave, because everything that Seth said is, you know, we've never asked him to be an activist. We've never asked him to do anything other than sit in a racing car and win and be successful. But he's chosen that. And I think that's quite a brave move, because he's undoubtedly going to be criticized for everything. Every move he makes is criticized as much as it's adored. And that's why I think he's so important to Formula One. He's transcended what a Formula One driver is, I guess, in a way that Schumacher did in terms of level of celebrity and interest. But Lewis has taken it one step further and said, I want to use my influence for good. And whilst sometimes he has been misguided, he's probably the first person to say that he's spoken out of turn or spoken without all the information. But that's a really brave step, I think, for an athlete.
You can't win that, because when he does the activist thing, people will criticize. And if he doesn't do anything, people will criticize. So there's no way he can win that one.
I just want to say, I don't understand why this has to be taken into the realm of, you know, that somehow racism is political, that he's speaking out against racism and prejudice, there should be nothing political about that. You're either for racism or you're against it. You know, pure and simple. It's one or the other. You're either there or you're not there with it. You know, and it's been amazing to hear the responses from some people. We've had iconic, prominent drivers come out and you know, have comments that say, "Oh, there's no racism in motorsport. There's no politics in motorsport," where we can go down the line of history. people who've raced in the Indianapolis 500 that have been on your show, Jennie, and we know who we're talking about, who have sat there and said there is no racism in motorsport when we can go back to the 20s and 30s, to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where Black men, Black drivers were denied racing in the Indianapolis 500 for simply being Black, pure and simple. You look up Dewey Gatson, you look up Charlie Wiggins, you learn their history, and you will see that's pure racism. We can go to Wendell Scott in NASCAR. We can go to Willie T. Ribbs in IndyCar and his lineage through multiple different disciplines in motorsport. There's a history here. And it's very interesting. It's disappointing to hear those kind of comments that just sort of put this blanket that there's nothing to see here, when we have a history of it. And you can't solve a problem until you acknowledge it, until you realize it's there. Then you can start working on it. Then you can start tearing it down. No, will you ever get rid of it? Of course not. But you can start trying to do what you can to meter it and start developing opportunities like what Lewis has been doing with the commission that he's developed, to help give people of color an opportunity because they see it's a very hard road for a person of color in motorsports.
Just out of interest, Seth, do you think enough has been done?
I want to give some praise to Chase Carey for putting the initiative together, for getting getting this ball rolling. Can there be more that can be done? Of course, there's tons of stuff that can be done, lots of different things that can be done. But yet you want to make it in a way that people are not going to be offended. Yes, people are going to be offended no matter what you do at times, but you can start developing pieces and segments to really put a spotlight on people of color in motorsport and in Formula One. Everyone who works up and down the paddock, everybody who works in the garage, everyone who does hospitality, there are people there that are people of color that do work in Formula One. I've met some of them, and it's there. So yes, there's a lot that can be done in terms of doing this. And I hope that the incoming administration will continue, what Mr. Carey has put forward with the initiatives and keep them going heading into the future with Formula One.
Right, I'm going to change tack, but not hugely, because I'm going to stay on social media and potentially mistakes that one can make in social media. We know Lewis Hamilton has done it before. We've probably all done it before, let's be honest. You tweet something and you go, oh, delete, delete, delete. Or you wake up in the morning going, oh, I not only have a headache, but I have a very full inbox. What did I do last night? Lando Norris. So he wrote an apology, which I shall read out. He said, I owe an apology. I have been stupid and careless with some things I've said lately in media and interviews, and I haven't shown the respect I should have to certain people. I'm not that kind of person, so I know I should apologize to them, but also everyone reading and listening. Sorry. Jess, what's going on with Lando? Why did he feel the need to put that out on social media, and was he right to do so?
So we asked McLaren about where did this come from, what's he apologizing for, and they said we don't know. They didn't put anything directly associated with the apology, so we are assuming it's of two major things. One, his radio message when talking about a certain Mr. Stroll, in which he used a very naughty word on the radio. And also for maybe some of his comments around Lewis's record-breaking win, in which he kind of said, well, he's in the fastest car, so it doesn't matter to me. Lando is a driver that has grown up with social media. He lives on it. He's built his brand on it. It's one of the things that I've always actually applauded him for, because he is so authentic with his fans. And the fact that he's only in his second season in Formula One, and yet he's probably one of the most popular drivers in terms of fan base is testament to that, because he's so connected with his fan base and he understands the importance of openness and honesty with his fans. But sometimes, as we know, these drivers, they're athletes, they're operating at really high levels, and especially when they're driving, high levels of adrenaline, they get very heated, they can say things in the heat of the moment, and sometimes they say things that they don't mean. And the problem that they've got, that maybe the likes of Ayrton Senna and people in the past, is that those radio messages aren't broadcast to millions on television. Their lives are played out, play by play. Their words are played out. everything they say is scrutinized. And I do have to say, because maybe it's worth bringing up Max Verstappen as a versus point. He has had the complete opposite approach. He said some, again, rather offensive things in the heat of the moment. And when asked, do you want to apologise for saying those things in the heat of the moment, declined to. Whereas Lando apologised twice. He apologised on the radio after the race and said, I'm really sorry, shouldn't have said those things. I got a bit upset. I'm really sorry. Lance Stroll deserves more respect than that. Fair play. And then decided to put out this additional tweets to cover off his back again. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's the Brit in me and I'm just used to apologising for everything and always being inherently sorry. But I just think that in terms of when we're thinking of these athletes as role models or people that people look up to, and especially when we're talking about the fact that we are going through a very sensitive time at the moment, and how should we be talking to one another? How should we be respecting one another? It's important that these drivers, whilst maybe haven't asked to be role models, the fact is that they are, because they're in the public eye and people look up to them and want to know what they're like as a person. I do think that Lando is one of those people that does seem very respectful and does seem very genuine when they're trying to do good, even when they don't always do good. Max, on the other hand, as I said, complete opposite approach. And it's one that actually just makes me quite sad. Now, people have said, oh, are we looking too much into this? Should we even be taking into account what drivers say in the heat at the moment? You know, cast it off. They're upset. They're high on adrenaline. Leave them be, right? Why are we scrutinizing everything they do? But I think it is that reason that we're moving into a society, finally, where respect should be center point in everything, in the way that we communicate with people. And I don't think it shouldn't be an excuse that, well, I was angry. I think a big part of the current like We Race as One or the Black Lives Matter movement is actually some people don't realize that what they've said is either inherently racist or inherently offensive, and it's about relearning how have we been talking. I'm actually quite interested to know from a Dutch perspective, because one of the things on Twitter that I saw in relation to Max's use of the term Mongol, I saw a lot of Dutch people saying that's just a Dutch word for a stupid person. Like, do you think that there is the awareness of the fact of like that root word being quite offensive to the people of Mongolia?
No, it's not the people of Mongolia. It's a Mongol is someone in Holland who's got Down syndrome, and it's those people that actually get upset. And you shouldn't use that word. But Lando should not have apologized for anything, because what he said on the radio, I could totally live with, because and the responsibility for that being broadcast lies with FOM. It lies with someone who's listening to him and thinking, yeah, that is nice, let's put that on air. I mean, Lando is talking to his engineer, to McLaren. He's not talking to you and me or Jennie or anybody out there, but someone decides, oh, that's good television, let's put it out. So Lando should not apologize for that, because it was never meant to go to us.
Do the drivers they know that, right? Is that not part of their, I mean, because one of the things that we want, and I do agree with you, we don't want Formula One drivers to all of a sudden become PR machines, you know, they're in whenever they're on camera or whenever they know that a microphone is near, because then we wouldn't get these amazing personalities that we've got. You know, Lando is a great personality. You look forward to seeing him on camera, or you look forward to hearing his, you know, he's become a bit of an internet sensation because of the things that he says on the radio. So you don't want him to ever feel like he loses that. But the drivers do know that this radio gets broadcast. So where does
No, they know it gets recorded and it could be broadcast, but that responsibility lies with someone else. Going back to Sebastian Vettel, who was talking to, calling Charlie names. Max has been, they've all said things, go for the funny things. Kimi saying, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. That is funny. these things, of course a driver is going to say something like that when he's just been driven off the road. And I honestly believe that FOM should not broadcast things like that. So Lando should not have to apologize for it.
What about Max, Allard? The biggest problem is if you make a mistake or you say something that is hugely offensive, and then afterwards then offend even more by saying, well, it's not my problem. It is your problem, Max. You are a global star and you are representing not only your brand, but Red Bull and Formula One. And if you say something that is that offensive, unless you yourself are not properly educated into how offensive that is, then that's one thing. But then surely later Red Bull, F1 need to manage that situation and say, okay, how do we navigate this to make sure that our driver doesn't say something as vile and offensive as Max said? And really what he said was totally unacceptable. And it wasn't broadcast, but the unedited version obviously got out there.
That shouldn't come out there. I mean, that's, you know, and he maybe should not say what he have said, but it's not, he doesn't say things to be broadcasted. I mean, it's just, you know, he tells a team whatever he wants to tell him. And I still believe that responsibility lies with the broadcaster that is I mean, it's the funny thing is, back in, I mean, 98, I think it was, we at RTL got hold of a list of frequencies, and we thought, oh, that's funny. So we put a scanner and we put them out on air. And Trevor Foster, who was then working for Jordan, went ballistic because he found out through then Dino Toso, who was working for him, that we did that one race only. Trevor went ballistic. He said, that is a conversation between the driver and the team, and it's not for you. It's not your decision to broadcast that. Okay, times have changed, but still there's a delay. It's not live. They listen to it. So whenever there's from a car to the pitch a conversation, I think that responsibility lies with the people that doing the broadcast.
Because there was a similar situation that happened in Formula 2 with Dan Ticktum, and he got a lot of heat for being very vocal, complaining, and he just got a lot of abuse for everyone was like, oh, be quiet, shut up, just drive the car. Yeah. But again, it was because the broadcaster was choosing, let's just go to Dan's radio again. Let's go to Dan's radio again. He's been really vocal. Let's just keep broadcasting that out. When probably in actual fact, there were a lot of other drivers saying the same thing. But it was just that it was the edited storyline fit nicer if they kept going back to Dan. So it was a little bit unfair on him in that instance. So I think I do have to agree that there is a slight responsibility on, is that content decent enough or you know, clean enough to be broadcast?
And I just want to say, at what point do we draw the line though? You know, where do we, you know, be it FOM or the team? Because if a driver is saying something, you know, racially or anti-Semitic or racially offensive, you know, even if the team's hearing that, that falls on the team to say, well, should we have a person saying something like that? Is that okay? You know, just, you know, heat of the moment or not, you know, is that okay? Like, where do you draw the line and say, hey, okay, this is, you know, hey, this is just a young kid saying, you know, what young kids say. Okay, but then we go to another level. If we start saying something like Jennie said, that is seriously offensive, you know, to a particular race or a particular community, you know, and it falls on, I think it falls on both sides. It falls on the broadcaster and the team, because the team should say something about that. If they have a guy who's going to say something, you know, seriously offensive like that.
I was going to say, I think both arguments apply. The problem is that it was broadcast or it was made public. And it's to do with, okay, the fact that it is out there and it has been said and it has offended people. The polar opposite approaches of Lando being like, I could not be more sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, that is one extreme. And Max's approach of, not my problem. I think the PR that's been handled around that attitude is what has made most people upset. The fact that he is so unapologetic, to the point where even though people are complaining, the team nor the driver has said, do you know what? All right, I said a stupid thing, I'm sorry. That's all it would have taken. That's all it would have taken. But the fact that he hasn't has actually caused more of a discourse about it. Everybody seems to get offended by everything. And obviously there are serious topics that people should be offended by and we should be talking about eradicating from our societies. And there are smaller things that people get absolutely caught up on, and it gets hyped into from 0 to 100. And all of a sudden we've actually lost the discourse that we're talking about. We've lost the seriousness about what actually is the problem here. And that's really damaging for these movements, because it's no longer about, okay, we shouldn't be inherently racist. We shouldn't be looking to cause divisions and to cause offense to people. We should be all kinder to one another. It stops being about that and starts being about something entirely different. A conversation gets hijacked, and that's the danger that we find ourselves in.
If Lando apologizes for saying that he doesn't really care because Lewis is in the best car and he should win every race, he's factually right. He should not have apologized for that either. I mean, it might not be nice to say,
but I think it's just more the respect, right? It's the respect to a fellow driver for having achieved something that we all thought was impossible.
No, Jess, that is absolutely right. But I mean, yes, Lewis has achieved that. He is the best, but yes, he is in the best car and he should win every race.
True. But I think Lando wants a persona where he seemed to be respectful. Yeah. Lando wants a persona that he sees like, I have recognized this talent, because I think that's how he would want to be treated as well. So I think that's the reason behind his apology, mainly. Yeah. And obviously he doesn't want his brand tarnished, because without his brand, he can't make money. So.
Right. This takes us very nicely onto what was going to be quite a lengthy debate, but it's going to have to be the shortest game of who is the greatest driver of all time ever, because we are running out of time.
Well, I think it's going to be obvious for me. It's going to be Lewis Hamilton.
I thought you were going to say Jackie Stewart as well. You've blown it.
Well, we won't talk about that. Oh boy. Because like I mentioned earlier, for us in America, we quantify champions for not just what they do athletically, but for what they do outside of their sport. The merits and the accolades are great. It's great to achieve championships, but what you do as a human being, that you show that you are more than just a guy who puts on a helmet and gets in a car and drives around the track, means a lot to people. And I think when you're the total package and you can do everything, and we see Lewis Hamilton does more than just race, that we see that he's gotten into fashion, that he's set a future up for himself, that he's getting into other things. He's putting other irons in the fire because he knows that when his day is done as racing, he's going to have something else to do. That he's achieved a lot of different things in a lot of different areas. And I think that gives him that total package of aside from the stats, because we can go down the stats all day long, well, we won't have enough time to do it, but the fact that we can put those stats on top of the other things that Lewis Hamilton has done and is doing, I think makes him the total package to be the greatest of all time.
So I'm one of those people that don't really understand our obsession with needing to label people as the greatest of all time.
That's how Jess is going to get that argument done.
Sitting on the fence. See what I've done there? It means I don't have to come down either side. I just think that we have such a amazing tapestry of drivers and eras that have defined what this series is and what this sport is. And there have been key characters that have defined those eras, that have defined the evolution of Formula One. And I think it would be, people love a stats comparison. Well, as we said at the top of the show, there are way more races now than we ever had back in Fangio's day. But so I think it would be, I don't want to go as far as say disrespectful to say that, well, Lewis is clearly the best ever because of his statistics or because of what he's done, even though he's so important. He's so important to Formula One. But I feel like Schumacher did the same thing in his era. He defined what it was to be a Formula One driver. He changed the entire way and approach of Formula One drivers. Alain Prost arguably did the same. Ayrton Senna did the same. They've all been so poignant to the way that we view Formula One racing that I don't really like saying that there is one greatest of all time. So yeah, I have to say that I love the fact that we have kind of kings of each era. One day, hopefully there'll be a queen, but there'll be kings of each era, and that they define Formula One at that point in time, and they are the greats. I love the fact we have multiple greats. I think that's amazing.
I still believe if you look at who's the greatest of all time, it's got to be Mario Andretti. Winning the Indy 500, winning all those races in IndyCar, winning the World Championship, and you can equal that with Graham Hill. Those two, absolutely fantastic. But if you go statistics, it's got to be Fangio. I mean, 48% win rate. We can talk about this forever. I mean, I like people like Mario, like Graham, who won in different cars, different championships. To me, that makes a complete racing driver. But then it just, you know, like Jess said, there's so many ways you can look at it, different eras. But if you have like to say a bowl of greats, Lewis is in there.
I have to say, I always had and will always have a soft spot for Senna. And the return to Imola for me this weekend is one of a very mixed feeling of utter joy, because I think Imola is fundamentally a racing circuit and a racer's circuit. But I cannot get the image of Senna and his death and that horrible weekend for Formula One and all those people who suffered that weekend, both drivers and the F1 fraternity and fans. I can't get it out of my head. I never have been able to. And so for me, going back to Imola and thinking of all the great legends that we've had, the great champions, the great battlers, I suppose, that we've had in Formula One, whether they won or not. It's always, that's why we love it, isn't it? It's greatness tinged with sadness, tinged with risk, mixed with great ability. They're gladiators, aren't they? All of them. Yeah.
Don't forget Roland. Don't forget Roland.
You can't. It's just a horrible, heartbreaking weekend.
I tell you something.
You were there, weren't you, Allard? You commentated that weekend on everything.
Yeah, on everything. So that was a weird weekend, you know, in more ways than one. But tell you something funny about Imola. Last time we raced there, Max Verstappen was 8 years old. Lando was 6 years old. And Kimi was 5th.
Yeah. Oh, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been fascinating to listen to all your different views. And let's hope we have a safe and fantastic 2-day weekend.
Yes, I can't wait for a 2-day weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should have every race should be a 2-day weekend.
It's been a revelation, I think, for Formula One, and I do hope in the future they look at it seriously, because a 2-day weekend, we've proven it, haven't we? Nürburgring, great. Portimao was good because they had no data. Imola's going to be fast and furious. I just love it. Jess, Allard, Seth, thank you so much. Stay safe and speak to you all soon.
Having me. Bye, guys.
Be safe, everybody.